Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I want to begin by saying that I've been very moved by this morning's panel on extractivism. It just made me realize how many parallels are between Ukrainian and Georgian contexts, and it's really incredible to be part of this conversation, figure out how to build solidarities and resist oppressions and extractivisms together. I've been in the past couple of years researching and looking at the environmental history of central Ukraine, which is where I come from. It's Kirovohradska Oblast, Kropyvnytsky is the city. And today I will share a few layers of weaponization that I think are very important to pay attention to as we are trying to understand both the kind of the acute ongoing violence, but also think about it in a more long term. So the first one, thinking of the weaponization as the event. So this is the map from an incredible group called Ecocide, who are documenting environmental consequences of the war in Ukraine. Just for context here, so that's where roughly you see the most of the orange and variously colored dots and shapes. That's the currently occupied by Russia area. The entire front line is about 3,000 kilometers long, and the active fighting is happening on about like 1,000 kilometers, which is like a huge distance. It's like from here to Crimea, more or less, in the direct line. You would have heard kind of what you hear in terms of environmental and agricultural terms happening on the occupied area. What mainly makes it onto the news is the story of the local farmers being forced to cooperate with the occupational authorities. If you don't do that, your grain or whatever you're growing will be stolen or taken away from you. But there is another part of the story that I wanted to focus on here, because what also you see in this the orange circles on the map is the documentation of the 1,500 well, more by now because I checked it last week, and it kind of grows day by day, the number of agricultural facilities that Russia has hit. And what the reports often focus on when Russia hits those facilities is the grain or the losses, the economic losses. But the other side of the story is that, and I'm really glad that Lina, you were talking about vessels and containers, because what is also being hit is the agrochemical storage facilities, namely pesticides and fertilizers. And in Ukraine currently we have 3,500 of agrochemicals, so pesticides, fertilizers, that are legal for use in Ukraine. That's just a screenshot from the state database. So when Russia hits the agricultural facility, it sometimes means they hit the facility that stores toxic agrochemicals. A lot of these fertilizers, the pesticides, are actually illegal in the EU, where the environmentalists have lobbied to ban. Those are kind of the most toxic, but in Ukraine, a lot of those are actually still very much in legal use. So what that means is that they leak into the environment. Some of them become even more toxic as they are in the waters because of how they mutate. It's really a horror story. It's really heavy and very, very bitter to be talking about this, because by hitting these facilities with the drones or long-range missiles, Russia is basically turning Ukraine's agricultural storage facilities into their chemical weapons. The second layer to this, and going deep a little bit into this agricultural side of the story, is trying to understand how, like, these agricultural storage facilities that store pesticides, they did not manifest themselves there overnight. There is a longer political, economic, and environmental history behind why they're there, and I want to spend a few minutes talking about that. So Ukraine has one of the highest ratios of arable land. What Lina was mentioning is nearly 70% of entire land mass, which is huge. And there is still this image of Ukrainians' landscapes as the steppes places, but in fact it's actually agricultural crops that dominate the landscape. And again, this illustration I just made to try to convey the scale of this, because when I put the numbers together, I was a bit horrified, to be honest. So I just took the statistics from the just agricultural statistical yearbook that shows that in the 2021, so the year before the full-scale war, we had five plants that occupied 40% of entire Ukraine, which is that's huge. That's like the size of Romania or the size of entire UK. And why this matters is few different reasons here. So first of all of these five crops, so sunflower, maize, winter wheat, rapeseed, and potato. Some years it's the soybeans, but that year it was potato. That was the fifth one. All of these are export crops. So all of these are grown primarily for being sold on international markets. It means that more than 50% of them are sold elsewhere. It also means that the companies behind producing these crops, they are hardly doing any of the crop rotation, which is essential for maintaining soil health. There is no really letting soil rest. It's just this constant, very, very exploitative practice of just trying to get as much economic value out of the land as possible. And we are talking about the situation where before the war we had, by various estimates, but about like 1/3 of Ukraine's agricultural land degraded already, and that's part of that story. And the third reason why it matters talking about these five, not just the scale at which they are produced, but also it is these crops that require vast amounts of fertilizers and pesticides. So what was stored in those facilities is what sustains this system. This is pretty much like this whole landscape is functioning on like artificial life support, as if like human beings were constantly trying to live like on Red Bull. That wouldn't last very long, but somehow, we keep doing this with the land. And how we ended up with this, it's what Iryna alluded to a bit, like there is a long history of the Soviet time agriculture, of the Russian Empire agriculture, kind of, this does not start recently. And just to go a little bit deeper into this example, I've been focused in the past little while on one of these crops, the rapeseed. So it's also known by different names. You may know it as raps or canola or kolza. It's ripak in Ukrainian. I don't know the Georgian word for it. Maybe someone can shout the raps also. Okay, So so going back again to the list of the pesticides that are legal in Ukraine, of the 3,500 that are currently used, 700 are used for rapeseed alone, to keep all other life out of the field, to make sure that the rapeseed is produced at the rates that is required. And what makes rapeseed is very important and interesting to look at here, it's not necessarily the scale at which it's produced, because you can see it's not as like ginormous in terms of the land area it covers as sunflower or maize or winter wheat, but the ratio of export, because if the other crops have like maybe some of them 60 or 70% is exported, with rapeseed 90 to 95% is exported. So it's really primarily grown to be sold elsewhere. And it's not that it's just an export crop, but the story behind where and why it's exported is really important. So 95 of it goes, basically all of what Ukraine produces goes to the EU. And rapeseed is primarily known as it's used for cooking oil. It's like the third most common oil in the world. But Ukraine's rapeseed has less to do with food or eating, but it is primarily used for biofuel. And here I just made another graph to illustrate the spike in its production. So the stats start at 1992, and then you can see this very, very steep curve in 2003. And the reason for that, why the production went so dramatically, intensified so much, is because EU that year has passed the biofuel directive, which meant that the countries, the member state, states were required to add a percentage of biofuel, or also referred to as agrofuel, into the conventional fossil fuel as a way to address climate change, as a way to reduce emissions. So Ukraine obviously is not part of the EU, but it changed some of its land use to accommodate EU's growing demand for biofuels. So it's, that policy has a super long, complicated history, not going to go into it. Long story short is that eventually EU made kind of a policy U-turn. It stopped encouraging its member states to produce it. This was followed by years of lobbying and campaigning by different environmental groups who were pointing out that possibly growing, trying to solve climate change by growing monoculture plantations is not going to do it. There was also a common sense argument that it uses so much of the... There's something happening there. Sorry, I'm being distracted. That all of the land that could be used for food production is instead used for this like very technical crop. And also, of course, what these directives, EU policymakers did not take into account, how much emissions is associated with the actual production of rapeseed, because again it is reliant on vast amounts of pesticides and fertilizers dumped into the ground as they produce it. And I guess another important thing to remember here is that it's not that Ukraine just exports this commodity into the EU, but it exports the cheapest element of the value chain, because it is within the EU that the rapeseed gets processed then, and where it's turned into biofuel and agrofuel. Just very briefly, the also symbolic nature of weaponization that we are seeing. I think there's an amazing film inside on the more like practical damage that Russia is wreaking in Ukraine. But the symbolic level, is this? Yeah, it's still working, sorry. This is, I have been working on a project looking at how militarization of landscape occurs and how it's produced. And at some point, so on the left, it's just a picture of an illustration, botanical one, of a geranium. And at some point, I have discovered also that geraniums are the names of the drones that Russia uses in Ukraine daily. This is like the most common weapon that they're using every night. And these are the drones that Russia is currently buying from Iran. They are building their own facility to mass produce these drones. That is planned to finish by next year. And that kind of, got me thinking to like, what is this bizarre drawing on like blossoming plants to fold them into this militarization. And just to show this, that geranium is not alone in being folded into this semantic, but then very, very material violence. I actually phoned my dad to ask, like, hey, do you know anything about this? So, like, what's this geranium drone situation? And he instantly was able to name several of these plants that have like deathly weapon counterpart to them. So these acacia, hyacinths, chrysanthemum, peony, tulips, carnation, and cornflower. And at the bottom I put like that's the actual weapons that Russia is currently using in Ukraine. So it's, I'm not going to speculate on the reasons. What is this juxtaposition of this, like the sinister and the beautiful, but it's kind of, thinking that it takes also the symbolic militarization to produce war and to produce harm. And I've been working on this because I'm also a photographer, so I write, but I also photograph. I was using like these photographs that I made around the militarized landscapes, the UK Ministry of Defence military bases. I gathered plants in those places and then used them together with the geranium that I've been growing myself on my windowsill to make a photographic developer that I then used in the darkroom. And this is just a scan of one of these photographs developed with these plants matters and trying to turn geranium as a plant against its militarized counterpart, the militarized landscape. And that's also a petal of a geranium falling down in, I guess, representing thinking about what geraniums falling and landing elsewhere means, and how do we comprehend the interconnectedness of violence and the militarized landscapes. And just to conclude, I think, what we're dealing here is both the very acute, intense forms of violence that Russia is committing in Ukraine at the moment, but also there is the long-term exhaustion and degradation of land that has been happening for decades and decades, I might even say centuries. And thinking about the post-war recovery, there's no convenient before to go to. There are like Ukrainian environmentalists, but also the government are currently advocating for persecuting Russia for ecocide, which is, I think, completely legitimate considering the scale of violence that they're committing at the moment. But again, we can't just, it's not like things were perfect before February 2022. We will need to think about the longer ways that the harm has been produced and thinking about the future, how we then actually undo this harmful system. There's also this perception that land is kind of this rural issue in Ukraine. I don't know if it's a bit similar here or not, but this work is also for me trying to make land into the urban issue as well, because every decision that is made on the land, whether it's by Russian government authorities, the occupational ones, or the Ukrainian government, will have insane consequences for everything that's happening in the future. I think I'll end there. Thank you very much.